Hi everyone, my name is Ashley Reeson and welcome back to my channel, and today we are talking Milan Fashion Week since that concluded over the weekend. So we are going to just do a little video on some of the fall winter collections that walked down the runway. So without further ado, let's just get right into the video. So the first collection I want to talk about is Max Mara, and to start with the concepting of this collection, the idea is to take two book characters both from different Bronte sisters stories. The first one is Jane Eyre, so Jane Eyre is that one character, and then Catherine Earnshaw, who is from Wuthering Heights, is the second character. And the whole concept is because they are both polar opposite in their emotions and kind of how they are, the story is to pull them together to create a collection with the idea of combining the more demure side from Jane Eyre and then the more passionate side from Catherine Earnshaw. So that's kind of just where the story comes from. The collection was a development of portraying contrasts of romantic energy, since both of those characters have different ways of having romantic energy, and it was an attempt of trying to really bring in a true sense of heroine chic. But along with these two characters, a British surrounding was also an inspiration, while also bringing in modernizing Georgian aesthetics, and just all of that is the encompassment of the direction of the Max Mara collection. So the initial movement into the actual collection, the concept of British skies and dry stone walls is an inspiration that also pivots into one of the main talking points of this collection, which is cashmere. It's the color of cashmere, so like those like gray British skies and those gray kind of stone walls connect into cashmere, and the processed cashmere is called cassia for Max Mara, that's what they call it, and it's described as like a flinty gray color. So that's where the cashmere inspiration coming from British skies and stone, that's where they all kind of come together, because that's what cassia is under Max Mara. It's that flinty gray color. And along with this gray cassia color, the color palette is pretty true to like fall fashion. Madder Red starts off the show, which Madder Red is one of the oldest types of dye stuffs that's used to color fabrics and things like that. And this particular color creates an array. Usually they're more like orange red, terracotta, mulberry, or turkey reds. And then you can combine this dye stuff with other dye stuffs, and then you'll get colors that are more crimson, that are more rusty, could be more purple, some browns, and near black shades. And so that red color starts off the color palette in the show, but it's also a nod to old English dye stuff traditions, because that's where it came from. And then after the red, it goes into gray, and then it goes into brown and tans, like those kinds of neutrals, and then it moves into olive greens and then ends with black. So it's a very overall neutral and just fall color palette, which makes sense and I like it. As for the garments itself, there are teddy coats, field jackets, floor sweeper coats, and poacher jackets. Lines were utilized in not only like chunky knits, so having those like knitted chunky shapes and lines, but also in rib knits and corduroys, so you have more of those vertical lining. There were a few leather, velvet, and kind of lighter brushed fur fabrics used, and layering was a common styling theme, from double coated looks to double sweater looks. So there were some looks that the model was wearing a sweater and then there was another sweater kind of over and around it, or a model was wearing a coat and there was another coat over it, and you could see both of them. They were contrasting fabrics, they weren't the same. And as to no shock, the tailored pieces were perfection, which again, Max Mara and tailoring, they go together. Skirts were generally on the fuller side in either cashmere or wool, and had the added details of bomber jacket ribbing to add a depth of structure. And then something that was on almost every look were double wound leather belts as the styling detail. It was the main styling detail, and that also helped give more shape to each look. And then there were also some cotton bags and things that they were holding that kind of tied in the collection and the looks itself. But on the whole, for me, I love this collection. I think it's cozy looking, it's got the inspiration of that British energy, it's clean, it's well crafted. I'm not shocked because it's Max Mara, but for me, love it. It feels fall. I could see myself wearing it. I could see tons of people wearing it because it is overall a very wearable collection, and that's why it's so easy and so simple and it makes sense. Love the color palette. Again, never go wrong with those traditional fall colors for a fall season, and you can never go wrong with neutrals because they're neutrals for a reason. I loved the layering of the looks. I liked seeing that the layering was sometimes the same fabrication, but a lot of the times it wasn't, so you were getting more depth with the styling and adding more to a look with having different fabrication layering. And this collection is, again, not only fall winter, but it is totally Max Mara, and for me, I think that's just why it's such a good collection. Max Mara and their technique and how they do their collections is just perfect and very detail oriented and always comes out so clean, and this collection is no different. So for me, this one is one of the best collections, regardless of how simple it is, because it's how clean it is and well crafted it is that makes it so good. Next we have Blumarine, and David Coma brings a darker romantic energy to this fall collection, and the point of the collection is to create one that exudes tough love but also has a fantasy driven from Sicilian female glamour. It is considered much darker and has a shadowed kind of romanticism to it. But the main thing when it comes to Blumarine as a brand is that it is definitely more known for the more frilly and kind of light-spirited fashions, while Coma is very much known for sharp and precise designs, having more structure, having more shape. So it is very contrasting in the aesthetics with David Coma and then the actual brand, but this collection is a mixture of the two. Chiffons and Georgettas were used in a variety of different looks, while leathers, denims, and heavier tailored fabrics were also used, so there's those two opposites. The color palette consists of black, white, gray, and red, with a few hints of color kind of just in the prints and the details, as well as also having some blue denim in there, but I kind of consider denim to be a little bit more on like the neutral side, but that might just be me. Metallic accents were added throughout the collection, and tailored coats had corseting, and there were boning dresses and sculptured necklines that represented Coma. And then on the Blumarine side, kind of having that aesthetic, poet blouses, skirt dresses, and slip-like dresses were part of the collection, so having those structured pieces and then those much lighter pieces and then bringing them together is the mesh of the two aesthetics. Fur was incorporated in not just the outerwear with coats and things like that, but it was also in hems of skirts and dresses, and I actually really liked it. I thought it was cute. The house signature of the rose was mixed in with the Sicilian thistle as well in the details, with the floral detailing being like the main one throughout the collection, and it also varied in fabrication. So like the floral insert, however it was put into the garment, was a very common theme throughout the collection. Overall, the collection feels very balanced with having that fluidity and then the structure, and I think it's very obvious to see where Blumarine starts it and then David Coma ends it, and it was just a good mesh of the two. I really like the simple color palette. You can't go wrong with just a simple color palette. The red was my favorite. I just liked how bold it was, and I liked most of the looks that were in the red. I liked the flowy and easy fabrics that were mixed with the much more structured fabrics. I like just having the contrast. It adds more depth to things. The outerwear was great. The dresses were pretty. Love the fur moments. Again, I mentioned that a little bit earlier. The fur was something that I really enjoyed, and I think personally, which isn't that much of a shock, I did like the more sculpted and structured and sharp looks because I just like shape, but the flowy was still very pretty and very nice, and I still enjoyed it. And I totally get the dark romantic vibe that Como was looking for, and it works. It was pretty easy, effortless looking, but it had the mixture of the two aesthetics, and I think it worked, and it works for fall winter as well. Roberto Cavalli is next, and the theme of this particular show was Pompeii, which is the Italian city that was buried like almost 2,000 years ago by Mount Vesuvius. And that was the main inspiration for this fall collection. It was only kind of a matter of how you translate the city into prints and textures when Cavalli is very bold with those prints and textures. So it's just finding a way to make it either very obvious or very discreet, or a mix of both. True to the signature maximalism of Cavalli, the collection was very much that, but there were also some softer moments to break it up, and I appreciate that. It's always good to have things that kind of stop and start a collection, not just having one note of everything. Volcanic like prints and florals seem to be the main print theme for the entire collection, with the color palette being fairly loud with reds, yellows, blues, greens, grays, blacks, all showing colors that are relative to Pompeii in some way, either with the more nature side of things with the florals, or with the volcano with the reds and yellows and those kinds of shades. But of course there was also leopard print thrown into the mix, and there was also a hint of snakeskin, so there was also that print to kind of break up the Pompeii motifs. And then furs and leathers were used throughout the collection, and one of the main parts of the collection is something called burnout velvets, which are velvets that are put through a technique of chemical processing, and what it does is it will dissolve all of the fabric that it touches, and so what's left is whatever print and design that you put onto the garment. That's what's going to remain with the velvet, and it was throughout the collection. But there was also regular non-treated velvets as well, but the burnouts were definitely one of the main fabric types. Both of the print themes, the volcanic or the floral sides, were found on velvet or printed onto the fabric itself, like you would with silky fabrics or with like leathery fabrics. There was a mixture of what type of fabric the motifs were going to be on. And then there were also a few like clear plastic like outer layering looks. I don't really know how to describe it because I don't know what fabric was used, but it was a regular garment, and then the outermost fabric was just clear, plasticky, shiny, like it looked plasticky, and it was over it to add like another layer and to add some shine. And I actually thought they were very interesting looking. Some of them were really cool. As for the garments themselves, they were generally flowy and looser to the body, with any shape coming from the main styling detail of these large velvet belts, or if they were kind of just naturally a little bit more fit as a garment, so it kind of just sat with the body a little bit more, but they were generally looser with those big velvet belts. For me, I thought the collection was really interesting. I liked the boldness, I liked the texture. I think it all works for a Cavalli collection. I like the choice of the magma lava motifs, having the obvious print, which was like literally like a trail of lava, and then the more subtle prints that I really liked because it looked kind of volcanic, but it was subtle enough to where it was just a good print. And I liked seeing the florals. I thought the florals was a good opposite to the volcanic stuff, and I really liked just where it was placed and how it was placed and the colorations that it was contributing to the collection. And as I am a sucker for more shape, the more fitted looks were definitely my favorites, but because the collection was mostly looser and flowier, I still did very much like some of the more like slip-like outfits. And then I did really like the big velvet belts. I thought those were interesting, and they had like little tassels on it. I thought those were interesting. I liked how they looked as the belt itself, and then I liked how it added something to the looks that it was on. It all worked for me, and I think this was just a very well executed collection. Felt like Cavalli. It was bold, but it still had some subtlety to it, and I just think it worked, and the Pompeii motif and inspiration was very clear, and I enjoyed the collection. Next is one of my most favorite fashion houses, Versace, or Versace, and this collection has the potential of being Donatella's last collection, since there are like reports of a potential sale. So this could be a wild collection if that seems to be the case as we move forward in time. And with this collection, the direction is very simple. Donatella wanted the collection to just follow the rules of Versace. In her words, I love clothes to empower, to give strength and confidence. With this collection, I am not following any rules, only the rules of the Versace DNA, and it's exactly the collection. Exactly the collection. The revisiting of past collections is something that Donatella has been doing for a few years now, and she did it again with this collection, taking the offset shoulders from Gianni's last Atelier Versace couture show that was in 1997. It was the 1997 fall collection. And then she took the ballet costumes that he designed, which were fitted bodices and then crinoline skirts that were like not the normal like domed crinoline shape. It was like they're like much more looking, which those actually ended the show, and I really liked them. And then on the flip side, the show started with 3 Versace home duvet looks with the house motifs, and they were sculpted into these amazing garments. I loved these. I just liked the thick fabric and the texture that you could get with them. I loved the print. The second one was my favorite, 100%, but I loved all 3 of them. The color palette was very fall, reds, orange, yellows, purpley blues, and then the normal neutrals of black, browns, and then denim was also in there. And again, I consider denim to kind of be more of a neutral color because it's denim. And then metallic golds and silvers were also a part of the collection, as well as the Versace prints. So very much a Versace collection. And then for detail work, V's, like the letter V, was everywhere throughout the collection, in bustier tops with contrasting colors, or they were line-up prints, so like the print was lined up to look like a V if they were more column-like prints. They were also in color blocking into designs of skirts and slips, as well as embellishments on pockets, both on tops and on bottoms. Fabric layering and manipulation were in several of the looks, whether they were more like straightforward fabric layering with like a single type of fabric, or they had multiple fabrics and kind of felt a little bit more like there was more complication to it, and it didn't feel as like unified as like the single fabric, but it still worked. There was just like a little bit more chaos to it, but I kind of liked it. And then embellishments on denim was a thing, kind of like bejeweled almost, and that was in several collections from different houses, so that is a thing that's coming back or is coming for fashion. And then the 3D printed looks that were introduced last season, they were gold last season, returned for this one, but to elevate them, they had crystals on them this time, like oversized crystals, not this big, but like, you know, smaller. And the crystals were placed throughout, depending on if they were a dress, skirt, top, that kind of thing. And then there were 2 metal thread dresses that were inspired by Donatella's very first show back in 1998 for Fall Couture, and loved them. For this collection, loved the color palette, felt fall, it felt very Versace, all worked. The opening, closing, and metallic thread looks were my favorite. The opening were the duvet looks, and then the closing ones were the dramatic ballerina crinoline that went wee. Those were the closing looks, and then the metallic threads that were, there's 1 gold and 1 silver, and I loved those 3 sets of looks. I love the denim breaks. The denim breaks were very refreshing, especially with the color, and the overly simple lineup of silhouettes was something that I actually really liked. The collection itself wasn't crazy. It was pretty, like, what is the word I want to use? It just felt a little bit more subdued, but still very Versace, and it worked. But I just like some of the more simple kinds of silhouettes. And then there was really only one thing that I didn't love, which were the looks that had the bustier contrast look. So it was all black looks, and then it was the V here, and I think it was like a red or a blue or a yellow, those kinds of colors. And I just didn't love those. They were definitely my least favorite of the entire collection. They were fine, just not my favorite. And I will like side mention that the menswear in this collection was good, but I'm not going to talk any further about it. The collection felt effortless and easy, and even though it was effortless and easy, there were still show-stopping looks in different places that helped bring the entire collection together. And I think overall the collection just felt very Donatella. It felt very Versace, and that's why I like it. It works, but I'm also heavily biased to Versace, so I kind of knew I was gonna like it anyways, but it works, and I love it, and I guess we'll find out in the near future if this will be Donatella's last collection. And if it is, it's a good one, and I like it, and it works. But I hope it's not. I love having her as the creative director, but I guess we'll see. And then we have Dolce & Gabbana next, and simply being put, the concept of the show is called Cool Girls, and the inspiration comes directly from models, and the models that Dolce & Gabbana know, and how they dress out on the streets and in the world, pulling from models like Vittoria Coretti, Irina Shayk, and Mona Tugard, with kind of the concepting of vintage tees, lacy camisoles, cargos, jeans, biker boots, and then having like a big fancy designer coat to throw it all together. That was the inspiration. Very simple, very real, and very obvious when you actually look at the collection. And the most obvious thing too is that this particular collection and the concept is a big pivot from what we have been seeing and it was a reminder of the old diffusion line D&G that they stopped doing kind of a long time ago. But Gabbana has cited that this collection is the mood of D&G, the 2000s, but just make it more high fashion. And I felt that. I could definitely see it. The color palette's pretty traditional fall, dark and neutrals, olive greens, deep reds, deep purples, and then some pop of like more bold colors like pinks, along with the blacks, whites, browns, golds, silver metallics, and the denim. So mostly neutral, mostly traditional fall. We've kind of been seeing most traditionally fall colors for certain collections. The show was then split into two sections, day and night sections, but it started, and this was the majority of the collection, it started with boots and more street-like fashion before it switched into heels and lighter and more fun dresses. So majority of it was the day, and then the end of it was the night. The continuous idea of fur played a big part in this collection. Fur is definitely all over the place for fall 25, it seems, and it was here. And with this collection, shearling was used as lining in army coats and denim jackets and leather bombers, but then it was also used in big pieces like ponchos. It was like that was the main part of the garment. And then there was also leopard print. There was leopard print throughout the collection. Doubled up waistlines for pants were throughout the collection. Dresses were much more boxy and straight rather than having more curve and shape like what they have been doing. But there were also some very sheer dresses mixed in with that boxy shape that weren't necessarily boxy, but they weren't form-fitting. And then there were a few tailored pieces, not many, as well as a few looks that definitely did feel more like the Dolce & Gabbana that we have been getting, that had more of that like sexy Black Widow kind of energy, but there weren't that many of those. This collection definitely felt very different from some of the previous ones that we've gotten. Crystals were all over the place, on cargos, on denim, on jackets, on skirts, everywhere. The bedazzled and the bejeweled and the crystals on denim and all of that stuff is coming, and that feels very 2000s to me. On the whole, I 100% felt the origin of the collection. It felt more real, felt like something I knew. It felt 2000s, it definitely felt like D&G. And not just because of the 2000s energy did I get it, but it's also the fact that I've like totally worn things like this before. And so it resonated because it was such a real concept. And speaking plainly, I'd probably wear a lot of this collection because it's just so easy, and most of us girls probably wore something like this, or maybe we still wear stuff like this, and so it resonates. And I liked the collection. I liked that it felt more real, and it still had those moments of Dolce & Gabbana that we have been seeing. Furs were good. I liked the color palette. I liked seeing the crystal embellishments. The denim was good. I actually liked the doubled up waistlines. To me, I thought it was good, and I don't think I really have much in the way of complaints, quite frankly. So it's a good collection to me. And the last collection I want to talk about is Prada, and we're going to start with how Miuccia Prada and Raf Simons contemplated what feminine beauty was today, which we kind of all know in today's world that means idealized beauty and constant quest to achieve said beauty, the perfect face, the perfect body that can be purchased with cosmetic surgeries and enhancements that are not reality. We understand the beauty standard of today. The collection is meant to poke and prod at the current beauty standard and the current perception of femininity, which means doing everything they could to make the clothes look not the current beauty, which means maybe making it uglier, then people want it. So what they did was they gave skirts paper bag waists instead of having that hourglass shape. By using thicker, coarser fabrics, they don't feel very appealing to touch and they're not as inviting. Taking something like the little black dress and then making them look like 1960s sheath dresses that were made wrong by rescaling them. Imperfections came with seams being exposed, edges were left raw and unfinished, and then wrinkles were purposefully added to the clothes. And then all of the models had like bedhead hair and they were kind of a mess, and it was all like very not put together pretty. But obviously Prada is all about going against the cliche and fully believes that ugly can be exciting. And this collection, regardless of the fact that it might not be considered pretty or might not be considered sexy, there are things about it that make it in a way sexy and liberating for women, particularly talking about like the fur coat outfits, that it was just the fur coat and a pair of heels. That can be sexy. I liked those looks. The dresses that may have been void of just about any type of shape could be considered a confidence wielder for the wearer, regardless of the so-called non-sexy shape, because some of those dresses, regardless of how kind of big they looked or out of proportion or just straight up not particularly great looking, to me there were things that it still had a beauty to it. To me at least, that's what I was seeing. The collection and the designs to me are much more for the wearer than for the world, and that kind of seems to be what Prada likes to do, because it's not for the world, because they like to just constantly go against the societal system of what is good or what is sexy and wear something that may not be by definition good, but it is freeing and good for the women that wear it, and that's where the concept comes in. There are totally things that I liked about the collection, and there were also things that I didn't particularly love. And as someone that loves shape in garments, I 100% feel like this collection is pointed directly at people like me, where we care about shape and we want shape. But I definitely appreciate the message and the way that the collection was designed, because I agree with the need to kind of throw a middle finger up to the current beauty standard. I definitely feel it. But I liked the fur looks, as I said. I actually liked the paper bag skirts, regardless of how shapeless they were. There was something very interesting about it, and even though they were much kind of straighter and maybe even a little bit more oversized and wider, there was definitely something about it that I liked. And for the rescaling of the dresses, I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier. I didn't particularly think they were ugly. There were things about it that made it pretty in its own way, and something that people could 100% wear, and I think it still works. It's just not the typical pretty dress, but it still works. I may not have loved the jacket scaling, since most of it did hedge a little bit more masculine in its shape and kind of how broad it was, but I could still appreciate the direction. And to me, Prada did exactly what they set out to do. They continued to question fashion and status quo, and as that is their direction with fashion, it works. And regardless of the fact that this collection is not the standard feminine beauty, there are features of it that are pretty, that have femininity to it, that have feminine beauty to it, and work in today's world, and it works for women. And I think it was a good collection, and I also think it was really popular too with everyone. So I think Prada did a good job with it, and I like the message, and I like the way that they did it, because they did it in a way that works. And that is the end of my Milan Fashion Week Fall Winter 2025 collection review. Obviously I only did 6 collections. There were many more, but these are the ones that I wanted to talk about. There were others that I really liked. others that I don't. It's the same thing every season. There are things I don't like and things that I do like. But these are probably my favorites from what I saw. But that's my opinion. I would love to hear your thoughts on Milan Fashion Week, things you love, things you didn't love. Let me know down in the comments below. Next week, I will do the last coverage of Fall/Winter 2025 with Paris. But as for right now, this is the end of the video, so thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoy. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!